And welcome to the Man of the Law podcast. I'm talking today with Joe Scargill. Just a little background on Mr. Scargill. Joe Scargill is a United States Secret Service agent with over 24 years of dedicated service. He has a unique wealth of experience in leadership, problem solving, organizational performance, and operational readiness. Joe embodies excellence and professionalism with the agency and throughout the global community. Currently serving as a special agent in charge of the Jacksonville field office, Joe leads all the protective, investigative, intelligence operations in North Florida. Joe leads critical operations and strategies ensuring the safety and security of high-profile individuals such as the President of the United States. So, a lot there. You got a big job, a lot going on. But besides being a special agent for the Secret Service and you're a Jiu Jitsu black belt with a long pedigree of wrestling, grappling, and Jiu Jitsu. So that's really why we're talking, because we're both kind of in the industry. We're both trying to promote Jiu Jitsu and grappling based systems to law enforcement officers, just to make law enforcement officers better at what they do on a daily basis. So welcome to the show, sir. And I was just going to read one little bit of because I've got some data, and then I
Yes,
was going
sir.
to ask you a question. So, the one thing that here says, and I got this off EFC, and they got it from Police and Security News in 2017. So this says ineffectiveness of pain compliance in law enforcement. Studies have shown pain compliance is ineffective up to 66% of the time. And while control tactics are effective 78 to 82% of the time. So that leads me to the next question because we've had a lot of videos, and especially over the past weekend, we had some pretty high profile videos with law enforcement officers, using strikes to gain compliance, which really don't work. So again, Mr. Scargill, welcome to the show, and could I kind of get your take on the striking in law enforcement?
Yes, sir. Yeah, thanks for having me on again, John. I really appreciate the opportunity. And before I answer, I want to congratulate you on getting your black belt.
Oh, thank you very much, sir.
I hope all the listeners know that. And again, I know firsthand the type of hard work and dedication and time and financial commitment that is, especially with balancing a high pressure job like being
Mhm.
a police officer, a family, doing your podcast. So for the listeners, what a testament to your work ethic and your dedication to your occupation and yourself. So congrats, man. That's awesome. I'm super proud for you.
Much appreciated, sir. Yep. The next chapter in the journey. Absolutely. I'm looking forward to
Yeah. Yep. Now you're just a white belt that didn't quit like the rest of
it.
us.
That's right. That's right.
um, yeah. So to answer your question, about striking in law enforcement. So I think the statistic was over 60% of the time they found that it was ineffective, right? So let's say every three suspects or subjects you encounter, um, and you try to use striking with only two of them, it's not going to work, and only one time it's going to work. Okay,
Basically.
so I think to break out the gravity of that, let's look. So if I get into three confrontations, I'm ineffective in two of the three. Now, if I was just being evaluated for a performance metric in any job, let's say law enforcement, whatever, medicine, finance, if I was to say, well, let's say I'm a surgeon and I say, well, John, I know you need shoulder surgery, or, I'm effective one out of three times with what I'm doing.
Yeah,
Would
that'd
you
be a
choose?
little scary. Yeah.
Would you choose me to do that operation for you? Okay. Or let's say I'm a home builder and you want to build your dream home. And I say, okay, well, I usually hit the mark one out of three times. The other two times I don't really get there, but one out of three, you may be the lucky guy.
Right.
So if we look at it statistically and again objectively, taking emotion out of this and stuff,
Mhm.
if I'm only effective one out of three times, I think in any profession we could agree that is an unsatisfactory result, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Except baseball, I think is the only profession I could think of where if you're successful one out of three times, you will be a Hall of Famer as a batter.
Right.
So in one specific little demographic of the 1% of the 1% of the most highly trained athletes in the world, that would be considered successful. Pretty much for the rest of us average Joes, if I'm successful one out of three times, it would be considered an unsatisfactory result. And we talked about I always use this analogy is why I advocate for controlling tactics and jujitsu so much in law enforcement is um, with striking, with jujitsu, with any combat sport, there's three results. I can win, I can lose, or I can draw.
Mm.
No other, no other options, right? So if I am in a striking confrontation with a subject and I win, that's good for me. But as we always talk about in law enforcement, what's that going to look like on camera?
Right.
Okay, so we get into a confrontation, boom, I knock a guy out or I knock him down and he's incapacitated. I win the fight, but in the court of public opinion, even if I'm justified, how's that going to look on camera? How's that going to look to the general public? Is that going to help and restore or promote the image of law enforcement as a community policing model to the citizens of the United States? Okay, let's look at the other option. I lose the fight. We're
Mhm.
fighting, boom, I get knocked out. Anyone that carries a badge and gun can agree, not a good outcome for me. Okay,
No.
so not effective. And number three, I tie the fight. Okay, well, I'm in a confrontation with a subject. I jab, cross hook him, break his nose, knock a tooth out. He does it back to me. Okay, now I'm hurt, I'm incapacitated. So a tie is not a good option.
Right.
With control tactics, I am skewing the statistics, as I know you and I both like statistics because I'm skewing the statistics in my favor. So if I win a control tactics confrontation, I am now controlling that subject
Hmm.
safely and effectively with minimal to no physical damage or long-standing damage to them.
Right.
Okay. If I tie with that subject, whether I lock them down in guard or I've just got a good side control position and we have tied the fight, right? We go to
Hmm.
the ground, I'm in guard, I have them held, and I have backup on the way. That is a good situation for me for uniform policing. You've radioed for help. They are on the way. I'm controlling this subject. I'm not taking damage. For Secret Service. My
Right.
post, I got in a confrontation at my post. We go to the ground. Help is seconds away. All I
Yeah.
do need to do is hang on. Okay. And if I lose the confrontation, that's bad for me, right? So instead
Hmm.
of just one of the three outcomes being good for me, now two of the three outcomes are good for me. So I've changed that 33 and a third percent success rate to a 66 and two thirds percent
Yeah.
success rate for me. Um, I like that because again, those are good statistics. And also, the appearance of this. You had sent me a video over the weekend, and I think it
Hmm.
was down here in Jacksonville. Was those officers that had gotten into a physical confrontation in, I think it was a football game, the Jaguars game. And,
Right.
and again, I wasn't there. I am not
Right.
indicting those officers. I'm not saying what they did or didn't do was right or wrong.
Hmm.
I wasn't there. I didn't. It's just a clip, right?
Right.
But again, to somebody that doesn't do what we do, does that look good?
Right. And the, continued strikes eventually, somebody's just going to cover up. And then, when do you go to control tactics and when do you change up the game? And, from what I see in most videos, and, I never critique the officers for doing what they're doing, but I always like to look at these videos and say, what can I learn from this? What can, because I teach a Friday night law enforcement class and, what can we learn from these videos? What went wrong? What went good? And what can change. And usually what I've seen with strikes is strikes do not put handcuffs on, strikes do not control an individual. And part of what we do, when I do kind of the effective fitness combatives is, it's just like jujitsu. You close the distance to minimize the strikes, and then you gain control through grappling and wrestling and place them into custody. So is there a place and time for striking in law enforcement? Absolutely.
Of course,
Yeah. But like you said, the optics are one, and then the end result is not, you're not getting the result you want. You might stun a person, stop a person for a little bit, but eventually you have to switch to something else. And in the one video we saw, which is, I teach this and it's, in jiu-jitsu they talk about position before submission.
sure.
So when I teach law enforcement, I teach, we need control before handcuffing. There's no reason to take your handcuffs out of your, out of your holder until you have control. Because now, what do you have? You have handcuffs in one hand and one free hand. So until you gain control, there's no reason to pull those handcuffs out because now it's just a deterrent for you, to get those on. So, and a lot of that goes down to training. A lot of, in the academies we're trained, grab one arm, handcuff here, instead of having full control. And the last thing should be those handcuffs. Because if your handcuffs are in one hand and then you're in a striking confrontation, now you're striking with handcuffs. And maybe, like you talked about before, am I, de-escalating the situation or, are my actions escalating it?
Yeah, sure. And then also, like, even if it turns bad again, I have to drop the handcuffs to gain control. Now I
Hmm.
have control, and now I don't have my handcuffs, right? Because I
Right.
dropped them, 10 yards away,
Yeah.
because I needed my hands again, right? So, like,
Right.
one of the reasons why I promote jujitsu so much for law enforcement officers is I believe it prepares you for two very specific situations: the most likely situation and the worst case scenario. The most likely situation is that the subject has stopped moving, stopped resisting, is not combative, and I need to put my hands on them. Okay, so regardless of what happened in that timeline prior to this, it could have been a deadly force situation, it could have been shooting, punching, kicking, whatever you say. Before I take those handcuffs out, I need to touch the subject and control them. And I believe
Absolutely.
jujitsu prepares you properly for that. And again, especially for uniformed officers on the street, that is the most likely scenario.
Yeah.
And then the worst case scenario, I am on the ground and someone is on top of me or standing over me.
Hmm.
Um, and again, there's no perfect martial art. There's no perfect control tactic system, right? That's going to but I believe that jujitsu prepares you for the most likely scenario and the worst case scenario
Right.
as just an average officer, law enforcement, or deputy out on the street. Is again, the person is compliant. I put hands on. I do
Mhm.
that in a safe and effective way, or they're proned out on the ground, or they're down on the ground, and I need to put hands on. They're not resisting, and if things turn poorly, I believe now I've got my hands on that person. I've got my jujitsu techniques to control that person safely and effectively. And then number two, the worst case scenario, I am on the ground. They're either on top of me or standing over me. And again, anyone that's practiced jujitsu knows you're in that position every night of practice
Right.
multiple times, and that's a position that if you're training properly, you should be fairly effective in. So that's why I like jujitsu, especially as opposed to striking, right? Like if I'm on the ground and you're standing over me, not easy for me to punch, right? If I'm
Right.
on the ground and you're on top of me, whether it's mounted, guard, whatever, yes, I can strike a little bit, but all things being equal, the person on top is going to have much more effective striking techniques than me on my back, right on the ground. So
Right.
again, I always tell my kids and tell my colleagues at work, I want to hedge my bets and skew the statistics in my favor, and I believe jujitsu does do that just by the nature of how the art is practiced.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And you talked about, being on your back and being on the ground, and like one of the first things you learn in jiu-jitsu is, the technical stand up. And you see a lot of police officer videos where they get knocked to the ground and they kind of don't know what to do from there. And, in jiu-jitsu, you pop right back up, in a technical stand up and you're back in the fight. And that's, being comfortable in those uncomfortable positions. You get used to that in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, it's not a position I'm dying to be in, right? Like especially
No.
in a real life situation, right? I don't want to be on the ground with someone on top of me or standing over me. That's extremely dangerous, right?
Right.
And again, there's a lot of other considerations I need to take in than when I'm just practicing jujitsu, right? Do I have a gun on? Can I get to my radio? Did a knife fall out of my pocket? Did I lose my handcuffs a couple feet back when the scuffle started? Right. So again, I want to be clear. I'm not saying I'm on the ground, someone's on top of me. This is awesome. No,
No.
this is absolutely horrible, right? Especially as a
Right.
Secret Service agent. I'm in a suit. I got a tie on. My motion's restricted, right? I don't
Hmm.
want that. That's not an environment I'm begging to be in.
Right.
I'm just saying that being a practitioner of jujitsu, I feel like I'm prepared if that God forbid that situation did occur, I at least have quite a bit of training hours in that position and feel like I could be fairly effective there, right? And
Oh,
again,
absolutely. Yeah.
no one knows what they would do until you're in that position. So I don't want to make it seem to the listeners like, hey, I'm so great. If I get on my back and someone's over me, I'm going to win the day just based on my awesome jiu-jitsu. No, I'm not saying that at all, but I'm just saying like I would like my odds and your odds as a black belt are way higher than someone who hasn't trained it at all or
Right.
has only trained it in-service training once a year for an hour.
Right.
So again, this is another thing that people always say is like, like the icy red crowd, or, I'm just going to pull my gun and shoot him and things like that. And I'm like, those are not strategies, right? Those are techniques. A strategy is to train a
Mhm.
system. A strategy is to train a system over and over again, repetitively in different scenarios, increasing the difficulty until you feel effective there, right? A strategy is not, well, I'm just going to poke him in the eyes, pull my gun, and shoot him if that
Right.
happens.
Right.
It may come to that, right? God forbid,
Hmm.
I may have to do that. But I want to rely on something I've trained repetitively, that I've
Hmm.
found success in repetitively in a controlled environment like a jiu-jitsu school or a defensive tactics program, and then hopefully that my training and time I put into that will overcome the moment and I'll be successful.
Yeah, no, I agree. And people say like, well, I'm not going to be on my back and guard in a law enforcement situation. But when, I train with my officers on Friday, we train sprawls to avoid the
Yeah,
takedown. But we also train, if you do get taken down, you can pull guard and you can get, back to a good position from guard. You can do a technical stand up from guard and get back to a good position and reverse it. And you could also, like we talked about a tie, if I get taken down somehow and I get you in my close guard, I'm probably just going to hook both your arms and just wait. And if I have backup coming,
right.
that tie wins the game because I know I could sit there for 20 minutes and hold you if you're bigger and stronger. If I'm in a good guard position with both your arms wrapped, and I'm not in danger of having my weapon taken or anything like that. But so you have to train those bad positions. You can't just say, well, I'm never going to be on my back or I'm never going to get knocked down like that. Well, you see these fights get kind of ugly and they get into scuffles and you have to train the bad positions too, not just the good ones. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we do it with other things, right? Like think about firearms. Like we qualify. We shoot one-handed. We shoot off-handed.
Sure.
We shoot from strong side barricade, weak side barricade. Like, do I want to be shooting offhand, weak side barricade? Absolutely
No.
not. Like that's not an
Right.
ideal shot for me, right? Like that's not where I'm at my best, right?
Right.
But I train it just in case. God
Right.
forbid that's the shot I have, and that's the position I have, and that's the shot I need to take. So I train it. So same thing with jujitsu, right? Like I don't love being having someone in my guard with them over top of me, especially in a real situation, right? Like that's not ideal. But
Hmm.
again, I train it because I want to be prepared. Same as wrestling, right? Like you train how to stand back up and reverse positions. Does that mean that you want to get taken down and lose 3 points and be in that position? No, absolutely not. Of course not. But
Right.
you've got to train how to defend against that
Right.
once it happens, right? And how to turn the tide in your favor. So
Right.
um, and people that say, well, I would never be on the ground in my guard. Okay, well, like come to the gym and see how that happens.
Yeah,
See how
exactly right.
how quickly that can
That's true.
happen for you, right? And and
Right.
and again, not that I'm some badass and can put anyone in the world on the ground, but again, I know you feel the same way. Like I've got some pretty good, pretty tough guys in my gym that whether you want to be on your back or not,
They're going to put you
that
there. Hmm.
yeah, like we talked last time, with Randy Couture, like whatever I've sparred with Randy, like there is no chance in hell I'm going to
Hmm.
get a takedown on him, right?
No,
So like
it's not going to happen.
I'm
No.
I'm like I'm going to use the Helio Gracie strategy, and I'm going to pull guard and hold and try my best not to let him pass my guard and try to be effective from there, because the takedown is
Right.
just going to put me in a worse position. I mean, it's stuffed and go behind, and now I'm going to be fighting for my life with somebody on my back that's a way better athlete, way better wrestler than me, right? So,
Right.
um, perfect example, of that. And even in MMA, you get some of these great, Brazilian jiu-jitsu players, and they're effective from guard. Like they're not going to give up the takedown and the big strike,
Sure.
so they try to get it to the ground. And even if they're in
Hmm.
guard, you know, it it's Again, not my favorite position. I train it
Yeah.
a lot. I train it a lot.
Yeah. And it kind of leads back to kind of some of the training in law enforcement where it's, you're going through positions, handcuffing and all these things with minimal or no resistance. And I think a lot of the new training that's coming along is more pressure tested. And it's not just one day of red man where you're beating them with a foam stick.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's one officer against another officer, and you do, a legitimate, gun grab and go, and so it's more pressure tested, and people kind of need to feel that kind of pressure. Okay, you're going to start in bottom mount. You got to get out of mount, get back up to your feet, and get to a better position. And I think those positions work fantastic for law enforcement.
Totally agree, man. And when I worked in our training academy back in the early 2000s, believe it or not, we actually, did that kind of training. A
Yeah,
lot of, getting up from mount, things like that. We also did the traditional red man with the sticks and
sure.
and things like that. But that kind of training kind of ebbs and flows in law enforcement, right? Is like, once something new and shiny comes along, people pivot to other things. And again, don't get me like, I don't want to make this a whole podcast about bashing striking. Like, I think striking
No,
is
yeah,
is a very effective combat system.
right.
Um, we're talking, but this is for law enforcement, this podcast and guys like
Yeah.
us. And again, I don't want to have to rely on hitting someone hard enough for them to do what I say,
Hmm.
for a lot of reasons that we've discussed before. I just feel like, one, if I hit them and it doesn't achieve the effect and now they're hitting me back, not great, right?
Right.
Two, am I the one that escalated the situation, right? We've all been in those situations. And I remember as an instructor in the academy, especially when there's multiple officers, you have these recruits and, you got one guy screaming, give me your hands, and the other guy screaming, don't move, right? And
Right.
then every
Exactly. Yeah.
every
Hmm.
time you move your hand, the guy screaming, give me your hands is wrenching your arm behind the back, and the other guy's hitting you with the baton because he told you
Right.
not to move, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
so kind of same thing with the striking. It's like, stop resisting, boom, and I punch you in the face. Like, well,
Hmm.
your natural reaction is a flinch reaction, right?
Yeah.
And so now it's like, oh, you resisted, and well, boom, 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 right? Or
Hmm.
you get somebody who's maybe not had the best of experiences with law enforcement, and they're pretty well trained, and stop resisting, boom, you hit them, and they're like, okay, well now it's on,
Right.
like,
Exactly. Right.
so
Yeah, and I look at it, from a law enforcement point of view. If I have a confrontation with somebody on the street, I don't see that as a fight I have to win. I see
right,
that as I need to control this person and get them into handcuffs. I don't see it as, a fight. They might see it as a fight, but I see it as I need to control you, no matter what your behavior, and control you and get you into handcuffs and safely transport you or whatever we need to do. So, I kind of don't look at it from that lens of a fight. I look at it as I just need to physically control you and get you into handcuffs. Yeah.
one dude, that's a great way to look at it, John, and couldn't have put it better. This is not a fight between Joe and
Right.
subject
It's not
A.
personal. It's not
Right,
personal. Right.
right. And this is, it's not personal, right? And a lot of us,
Hmm.
we kind of become that persona, that us against them persona,
Right.
and like guys, like, we're not a Gestapo. You know what I mean? We're
Hmm.
not we're not a Gestapo. We're not an SS unit. It's not us against them. It's we're part of the community. We're members of the community. We just have a job that involves policing and keeping the community safe. And it's a mindset that I think you need to have. And I can't tell you how many times I've been out doing these protection details, especially recently, and
Hmm.
you're at a rally for whatever side, it doesn't matter, but inevitably someone always says, keep him safe, keep her safe. And my response is always the same: is everyone I protect, my job is to keep them safe.
Right.
Everyone. It's
No
not
matter,
personal.
right. No matter
Yeah.
their political views,
Yep. Yep.
Republican, Democrat, senator,
Yep.
whatever, your job is to
Yeah.
protect that person no matter what. And it doesn't matter. You're right.
Exactly. And I never caveat it with I keep them safe whether I like them or not. I leave that back part off. That's not fair because now I'm biasing what I said,
Right.
right? I just say I keep them all safe because that's my job to do.
Yeah.
And And I mean it, I mean it.
Yeah.
I'm not, I don't look at this. This is nothing personal for me. Right.
Right.
It's about the dedication to my job and my badge, and that's it. And same thing when I was in an office, when I'm out doing an operation investigatively or working with local police, it's not us against them, right?
Right.
It's a job we have to do, not personal. I don't want to win a fight. You said it perfect. I need to control you and get you in handcuffs for the crime that you may or may not have committed.
Right. Exactly. And it has nothing to do, with personal beliefs or anything like that. So. Yeah, so let's move on to the next question here. I was going to talk because you had a big assignment and you went to Bulgaria, in which kind of changed up your training a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
you got to there wasn't too much jujitsu out there at the time, so you kind of started some jujitsu and got to meet up with a bunch of people. So let's if you could talk about your Secret Service time over in Bulgaria.
Yeah, 100%. So, I always tell the funny story. So I was working in our training academy, and I had put in to go to our office in Rome, Italy. It was the fourth time I had put in for it, right? So put in one time, didn't get it. Put in another time, didn't get it. Put in a third time, didn't get it. And now this
Mhm.
was the fourth time. So I put in for Rome, and I remember sitting at my desk. It was in the basement of the building where our mat room was, and got a phone call from one of these, mentors you have in your career that are really high in the chain of command now. And he's like, hey, Rome. And I'm like, oh man, I'm ready to go eat some pasta and drink wine. He's like, yeah, it's not
Right.
going to work. He's like, that's not going to work out for you, And I was like, oh, he's like, but how does Sofia, Bulgaria sound? And
Mhm.
I'm like, well, it sounds like I don't even know where the hell it is,
Right, exactly.
but this wasn't the type of person that you say no to. And so, I said yes. And next thing you know, I pack up my stuff and off to Bulgaria I go. And, um, when I got to Bulgaria, this was in 2007, jujitsu wasn't even, super popular in America yet,
Yeah.
but in Bulgaria, it was almost non-existent.
Mhm.
But there is an incredible combat sports culture there. um, Wrestling for sure, judo, sambo,
Mm.
kickboxing, boxing, the old Soviet system, right? And
Sure.
the other thing there is, in their education system, um, at least back then, right? You're kind of tracked from an early age. So, for instance, like
Mm.
if you're in your maybe elementary school level, you're kind of identified what you're good at, right? So maybe they're like, John, well, you're really good at math. You would sit an exam, and then you would go to like the maths school
Okay.
for your whole educational experience, right up until college. And like,
Mm.
well, Joe, you're good at languages, so you would go to the English school, and then you're kind of, well, that also was the same for sports. So you would get tracked into the sports school, the sports track, right? So at a very
Mhm.
early age, kind of your full time education track, was sports heavy, right? And then you would, for college. You wouldn't go to, let's say, like Georgetown University. You would go to the National Sports Academy,
Oh,
and
okay.
you would be tracked in whether it was wrestling or judo sambo or karate or gymnastics or swimming, right? So these athletes are pretty darn good and pretty well trained. So we at the embassy, they have locally engaged staff that they hire, and one of the members of the guard force at the embassy was on a judo sambo team. And so if you think about kind of like how you have different like soccer clubs, Manchester United, this stuff. Well, they had like judo sambo clubs over there. So the one he
Right.
was a member of that, like it was a competition team. They traveled, um, and then you would make up the national team from people from that club. So very similar to how the regional training centers for wrestling are now. We have
Sure.
those at colleges all around, and then people from those regional training centers compete for a spot on the U.S. national wrestling team. Same thing in Bulgaria for the judo sambo team. So I had started going to the judo sambo training. He had invited me to go with him, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
Just really, I mean, these guys were unbelievable, unbelievable. And I think I've talked before either on different podcasts. Like one of the heavyweight on this team at the time was the only person to beat Fedor Emelianenko in World Combat
Oh,
Summit
wow. Yeah.
championships. He beat Fedor in the championship. So I mean, that's the level of guys we're talking about in this
Yeah.
club. You know what I mean? And it
Yeah.
just was awesome training to get to know these guys and roll around with them. And I was a purple belt at jiu-jitsu at the time, so share a little bit of jiu-jitsu knowledge, but just kind of building a reputation there. So I had met another young man through a friend at the embassy, a Bulgarian kid that really wanted to learn jiu-jitsu. So I started teaching a jiu-jitsu class, nogi jiu-jitsu class, like once a week, right? And we had people come and it kind of got contagious with them. And they now him and his brother are both black belts in jiu-jitsu. They own a gym called Twisted BJJ
Mm.
in Sofia, Bulgaria. They both got their black belts under Kyotera.
Yeah.
They're both really competitive. They're good. They have a huge kids program. They have a pretty good sized adult program, and you know that I'm proud to say I it kind of introduced them to the sport, which was
No, that's
cool.
fantastic. Yeah.
And now there's a couple really competitive teams in Bulgaria. So my wife is Bulgarian. I met her when I was over there, and so her and my boys go back to Bulgaria every summer. And
Mm.
my boys train jujitsu at a gym in her hometown. It's a GFT affiliate.
Oh, that's awesome.
Um, and their black belt professor, I think he's like a 12-time European champion
Oh, wow.
in gi and no gi. I mean, he was kind of like a his name's Plamen Petrov. He was kind of like an MMA legend, like one of the OGs of MMA in Europe,
Mm.
and just kind of found jujitsu. And man, I mean, the guy's just an absolute savage, like really good instructor. I mean, unbeatable on the mat. Huge gas tank, and I mean, the guy's still jacked at 50 some years old. But my boys go there and they train with the Bulgarian kids every summer and
That's awesome.
in jiu-jitsu,
Yeah.
with the gi on, and it's super cool. It's an awesome experience for them, um, to kind of learn, the same sport but through a different lens.
No, yeah, that's great. Yeah. And what would you say the difference is like? Because I know a lot of, when you go overseas, the mentality maybe of law enforcement officers over there, they kind of take a little more importance in kind of, continued training and training in either judo, sambo, jiu-jitsu, and kind of compare that to, the way things are here in the United States. So did you see a big difference there?
Huge difference. So
Yeah.
number one, their police academy is like 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when you go, it's a full like bachelor's degree in like police science, right? And involves
Okay.
a lot of training.
Yeah.
Um, so they don't deal with the kind of street crime, at least in Bulgaria, because I was stationed there for 5 years, so I got a pretty good picture of how policing is in that country. They don't
Hmm.
deal with the amount of violent street crime anywhere near the level of just an average officer in even a small city in the U.S. would.
Okay.
When I would tell those guys stories, out socially, and they'd be like, I don't know how you guys even deal. Like if a police officer shoots someone in Bulgaria, it's national
Yeah, it's
news.
a major,
It's
major. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's a big deal.
Mm.
That's a big deal. It's just kind of the way their society is. They just don't have that level of
Yeah.
violent street crime that we do here. And again, this podcast isn't a social commentary, so I won't get
Right.
into to why that is. But it
Yeah.
just they don't. But I remember I was oh man, there was actually an officer from the Chicago area who was a National Tactical Officers Association board member. He had come over to do some tactical training for the Bulgarian police department, and man, he is going to kill me. I just cannot remember his name. And he was from a suburb of Chicago that saw a lot of action. It was like Oak Park Village or something. Does that ring a bell?
It could be Oak Park. Yeah. Oak
Yeah,
Park is
something.
pretty busy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway,
Mhm.
he had come over, and I remember I was teaching. Uh, I was a canine instructor as well, so I was teaching a canine behavior class to this Bulgarian Tactical Officers Association. And it was funny. My wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, was actually my translator when I was teaching this
Hmm.
class. But I was kind of teaching canine behavior and how the difference between different drives in dogs, whether it's a survival drive, prey drive, fight drive. And I was trying to explain, like, you don't want the dog to be in like a fight for its life situation, right? Like where its fight or flight response is activated. For law enforcement, you want like a good prey drive, or even better, like a fight drive. And I said similar to kind of someone that competes in martial arts. And I was like, does anyone in this room have martial arts training or compete? You know, the whole class raised their hand, and
Right.
the main guy from the Bulgarian side stood up and was like, everyone in Bulgarian law enforcement and in this room trains something regularly.
Yeah. And
And,
continue
and
and continues to train on their own, and yeah, trains and has the
yeah,
important knows the importance of that continued training. Absolutely.
yeah, and this is the training on your own, and I just had this conversation in a lobby of a hotel when I was out on a TDY protection assignment with two colleagues from our special operations team. And we talk about this all the time in law enforcement. Well, we don't get enough training. The job doesn't provide us enough training time. We don't have enough people to give people the actual training they want. I completely agree with that, right? We
Yeah.
don't, as in my organization, I don't know anything about Chicago police, but I'm sure your organization, you do not get regular training days on a weekly basis or even a monthly basis, right? I
Mhm.
don't. Do you?
No, no.
So I mean, that is 100% the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
It is. Now, if I have a choice to make, do I want to take my own personal time, my own personal money, and make an investment in myself professionally and personally, and better myself to be a better agent, to be a better officer, to be a better deputy, to be a better trooper out on the street? And I would challenge you to say that in no other profession, especially if it's revenue generating, are you able to sit back and say, well, I could sell a lot more widgets if only XYZ company would just send me to the training, right?
Yeah.
If you
It's
said
not gonna
that in
happen.
your if you said that in your review, you'd get fired, right? Like
Right.
what you're going to do is you're going to say, well, look, I want to lead this organization in sales. I want to generate revenue and increase my salary and make a name and reputation for myself. So I am going to go and I'm going to seek out training in that, whether I go to sales meetings or leadership conferences or take extra classes to be better. Like, if I'm a doctor, I don't sit and say, well, there's this new surgery that is out there and I could help change people's lives. I'm not going to go ahead on my own and train myself in this. I'm going
Right.
to wait for the no, of course you're going to go
Yeah.
do it, right? So like, look, from a leadership perspective, I want to dump all my time and energy into things I can control
Hmm.
and influence and change, and very little into what I can't. We just came through one of the not one of the busiest campaign I've ever worked as a Secret Service agent.
Yeah.
The operational tempo, to say it was uncharted, does it an injustice. It was bananas.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no other word to describe it, right? So for me to sit and say, well, look, I'm not going to train jujitsu because the job's not sending me to do this. No, I mean, like, I would just go train. I'd throw
Yeah.
my no-gi kit in my carry-on and just, if I'm on the road and I have an opportunity, great. But when I'm home, I'm going to train it, and I pay drop-in fees or whatever I need to do, right? So again, I don't. I think the reality of the situation is we're just not going to get anytime soon. We're not going to get a training cycle as law enforcement officers
Right.
that we want, and that
Right.
to be effective on the street, even if you did it once a month, even if you had a 4-hour block of jujitsu once a
Right.
month, it's not enough, man. Like,
No.
because you got to think of it like this, like, just take basic fitness. Like, if I want to be a runner, if I just ran once a month, I'm not going to be good at it, right? Like,
Right.
it's something you need to do every day, or
Right.
or multiple times a week. You don't need to do it every day, but multiple times a week, right? At least a couple times a week, whether it's weightlifting, running, tennis, golf, whatever.
Yeah.
Pick your physical skill, right? So um, there's the reality of the situation is I need to do it for myself, and I need to make myself better at it. So
Yeah.
do you want to make the investment or not? You can think of all the excuses you want, but again, no other career is going to allow you to just sit there and demand that your job provide this to you, or you're not going to do it because you'd
Right.
get fired. You'd get fired.
Right. And even if, because I've had this conversation with other people too, like even if the police departments or, federal agencies implement the best, law enforcement, jujitsu, grappling based systems, and then they offered you to train, once a month, and that, like you said, it still wouldn't be enough. You still need consistent training, and I think that's where officers need to fall back on the jujitsu community, especially in Chicago. Like, yes, I could take this fantastic system in the Chicago Police Department and learn all these fantastic things, but eventually, if I don't consistently train that, it's all going to go away. So that's why I still believe that, you need to fall back on these jujitsu academies, where you live, and do some consistent training 2 to 3 nights a week. And that's really the only way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, so think about it. To use your analogy, think about it like this: like even if you get all this great training, like let's say, um, I'm a lawyer or a doctor, and I get fantastic training on the job, in service, continuing education. I'm still reading books, right? At night,
Sure.
maybe I'm going to sit in my chair and I'm going to read a book about
Hmm.
about what I do. Well, that jujitsu is the same way. Even if you got it once a month or once a week, you're still gonna like read your book and do a little more training and get even
Absolutely.
better at it. And again, you and I are passionate about it, so
Right.
it's easy for us to
Yeah.
show up and do it.
Yeah.
But if you just think about what it's going to offer you and the confidence it's going to give you on the street to handle situations more calmly. And there's a lot of statistics that back that up too, right?
A ton. Yeah.
Is it is it if your presence is there and you're confident in your abilities,
Hmm.
that there is an inherent form of de-escalation involved in that, right? And I'm not saying,
Absolutely.
hey, train jujitsu and you'll never have to use it. That's not what I'm saying at all. But especially for law enforcement, right? Like there's just there. We all know there's the subjects that the fight is. You're going to have to physically subdue them. They're just
Hmm.
they're not gonna just wilt to your overwhelming officer presence. So,
Right.
but there's a large majority of people there that are testing you and sizing you up verbally and non-verbally all the time, right?
Sure.
And if you're trained, um, there is an inherent confidence and calmness that you are carrying yourself with, right? And
Hmm.
then there's also some physical signs of it, right? Like the cauliflower ears, you're usually in shape.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
People notice that, right? Like
Right.
I went into the restroom of an event I was working. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? And a guy that I noticed had been looking at myself and the other agents while he was, and I'm in there, and he was standing in the urinal right next to me. He's like, "Where'd you wrestle at?"
Right. Yeah. He can tell right away.
Because he
Yeah.
saw my ears, he probably saw me limping. He sees my hands are all my
Yeah.
fingers are
Exactly.
going in
Right. Yeah.
different. But I mean, like,
It's true.
I don't know what this guy's intentions were.
Hmm.
Like you want to think they were just the best of intentions, but I noticed him.
Right.
And I wouldn't tell you. I would be lying if I didn't tell you. Like as soon as I saw him out of the corner of my eye walk in, the hair on the back of my neck went up just a little because I
Right.
noticed him. I noticed him from before looking at us, right?
Hmm.
And maybe he was sizing us up for good reasons. Like, hey, these guys
Sure.
look like they could really handle business. I'm glad they're here protecting the person I want to see or I want to support, right? So
Right.
and then now we're offering, as law enforcement officers, we're offering validation
Hmm.
to the job. Or maybe he was like, wow, I want to do harm to this person, but I saw these men and women and they look good, right? And now I maybe I've changed my mind. And we always say, like, like we all know the assassination attempts we haven't prevented, right? Because they're on national news. But I
Sure.
remember being in the academy, 25 years ago, and one of the instructors asking, "Do you know how many assassination attempts the Secret Service has prevented?" And
Right. Yeah. They don't have numbers because you just did your job. Yeah.
and you don't know, right? Like
Right.
how many people showed up to
Hmm.
do harm that day and saw a very professional, very prepared, very well equipped product and change their mind, right? And
Right.
and same thing, with law enforcement. Like you could say, like, well, how many attacks on law enforcement were prevented by officers just by their mere presence? Who
Right.
knows? Who
Yeah.
knows?
And
But
if
I would,
you're confident, you're squared away, they're going to make that choice of maybe this isn't the person I want to deal with because, they they might have a better opportunity of getting the better hand, upper hand.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we talked about this the last time.
Yeah.
I remember being in the academy, and we had seen that FBI report that they do every year. It was the officers, killed and injured in the line of duty. And so
Hmm.
their behavioral sciences unit, which is, the Silence of the Lambs,
Right.
where that movie was based off of. It's forensic psychologists and agents down there, and
Hmm.
they had analyzed several cases of officers that were attacked or killed in the line of duty, and why they were attacked and killed. And the
Right.
one that stood out to me, I tell this story on every podcast I'm on, because I feel like this is such an indictment on why you should be physically and mentally prepared for your job. Is this individual had, horrible life, had, total degenerate, career criminal, had just made up his mind he was done, and wanted to kill a cop, right? And so the week he did it, he was out, and he had multiple encounters with different law enforcement officers. So, the first time he was pulled over, it was a state trooper. And I forget the jurisdiction. I apologize, because I'd like to give them credit. So he was pulled over, and the officer got out of the car, big, male officer, totally squared away, mirror sunglasses, polished, the hat. He was very professional and polite. The guy remembered that. And he was like, I just didn't think I could get the jump on this guy.
Hmm.
Second time he got pulled over was by a female officer. She again was very squared away and polished. And he was thinking, he's like, well, maybe I could have taken her, but I was unsure. And I wouldn't want to have to go to jail saying that I got, like beat up or shot or apprehended by a woman. It would kind of kill my street credibility.
Hmm.
Um, Third one, the officer pulled him over. He noticed the second the guy stepped out, his shoes were unpolished. He was overweight. He was disheveled. And this is how perceptive this guy was he noticed that the keeper on his gun, the snap, was dusty. So he
Hmm.
said, I knew this guy hadn't trained, and
Yeah.
he took his opportunity, and unfortunately he killed that officer. And again, our day could come anytime we're out on the street. Like,
Right.
we carry badges and guns to work, which
Hmm.
means it's an inherently dangerous job. So
Yeah.
I could be the best shot in the world, the best at Jiu Jitsu. I could run a mile in under 5 minutes, which I cannot do, but I'm just using this as an
Hmm.
example. And if it's my day, all
Yeah.
those things I've done to prepare myself. Um, but I mean, that study alone, again, it's anecdotal, but that study alone shows you that even if you look the part, right, you
Hmm.
look squared away, and you're mentally squared away, that you can deter an attack. And
Yeah.
I'd much rather hedge, again, tipping all the scales in my favor. I'd much rather do that, and bet on that my demeanor, my presence, my training, and my appearance are going to influence this person's decision whether they want to attack me or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, there's a lot of things you can't control on the street. It's very unpredictable and bad things happen. It's just the way it is. But like you said, the things you can't control, if you can control them, your appearance, how much you work out, how many times you go to the jujitsu gym. So all those things you can control, and why not, like you said, better your odds if you can. There's no 100% fix, but I'd rather when I hit the street be as prepared as I possibly can to deal with what comes at me than the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, think about it like from a numbers research. Like, if we're gonna arrest someone, would I rather be by myself, or do I want like you and three of my buddies? Of course, I want as
Sure.
many officers as I could get to effect this arrest, right? So same thing. If I have to be out there by myself, right? This is a variable I can't control,
Hmm.
right? I'm on patrol. I'm on post as an agent. I'm on patrol as an officer, deputy, or trooper, and I don't have the resources to have multiple people right with me. So
Right.
what now I could think about? Okay, that's out of my control. I
Hmm.
can't magically conjure up more people. So now it relies on what I can do, right? Do I
Hmm.
have is all my equipment working and checked? Is my appearance squared away and professional? Is my mental attitude positive and engaged in what I'm doing? And am I physically and mentally trained and prepared for whatever situation may come at me?
Right. Yeah.
right?
And I agree. Yeah.
Those things are under my control. Now, is it easier to not do that, right? Like, do I, are there nights I don't want to go to the
Sure.
gym? Are there nights I don't want to work out? Are there mornings I don't want to wake up early to train? Of
Hmm.
course, right? I'm a human being. Like, I'm not, I'm not a robot, right? I'm
Right.
not,
Exactly. Yeah.
there's days I get on the mat and everyone says like, oh, 5 minutes after you start, you'll be glad you didn't skip.
Yes.
I'm
And
like,
that's
I've
how it
gone,
is. Yeah.
yeah, and I've gone through, a whole hour of training, and I'm like, God, man, I should have skipped today,
Yeah.
but
Right. Right.
I'm glad I didn't mentally, right? Like
Right.
physically, it hurt, but
Yeah.
mentally, I'm glad I didn't because now I feel like that overwhelming sense of accomplishment, and then
Right.
and also, the friends you meet on a
Yeah.
jujitsu mat, it's just
Yeah.
it's awesome,
Yeah.
and it gives you an opportunity to step outside of that cop culture that we all
Yes.
have, right? And realize like, there's people that do all kinds of different things for a job, and their job is not their identity the same way law enforcement is our
Right.
identity,
Yeah.
right? And it's nice to meet those folks and just kind of be normal for an hour, right?
Sure.
Um,
And like on the personal side, like you're training at A Force BJJ, which is in uh Ponte Vedra, right?
yeah, Ponte Vedra Beach, yeah,
Ponte
yep.
Vedra, yeah. And Ponte Vedra Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, A Force Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And like if I retired tomorrow and I wasn't the police, I would still go train tonight, because I still have, kind of this. I got into it for the law enforcement aspect, but it's been so much more. I want to continue training even if I'm, not the police anymore, and want to continue training even well after I retire, I hope. And because just all the personal benefits that go along with it. So that is one question I wanted to ask you, because I know you had a,
Sure.
a story about your son and he had some health difficulties when he was younger, and just the
Oh yeah.
importance of jujitsu and wrestling in his life.
Yeah, yeah. So, I have twin boys, and they're 9 years old now. They both had a very rough start to life. So, when my wife was pregnant, the blood flow to my one son specifically, the blood flow from through the umbilical cord was not flowing properly. So he wasn't getting enough of the blood to grow normally. So he was very undersized in the womb, and the monitoring was very stringent upon that. And I remember things were going okay. We were kind of moving along, and we went in for a routine checkup one night. I think we had plans with our neighbors to go to a hockey game. We're living in Detroit at the moment. And I remember the ultrasound tech was doing their readings, and normally these were very routine checks, right? You go in and it'd be a couple minutes, and hey, everything's looking good. Just hold the course, keep taking the vitamins, and everything's. And I remember the color just drained out of her face, and she was like, "Hang on a minute," and left. And the doctor came in, and
Mm,
like, I have no medical training except our emergency medicine stuff, but I know that
sure.
wasn't good, right?
Right. Yeah.
And they admitted my wife to the hospital right away. So not only was the blood not flowing, it had reversed and was going back the other way.
Ooh, yeah.
And so I remember we had a really really difficult choice to make because the doctor said, well, here's your choices. We can do an emergency deliver the baby, both boys right now,
Mhm.
but one is doing pretty good. And so taking him out any earlier than necessary could cause unforeseen health issues and risks.
Mm.
The longer he stays in, and to just put it like crudely, because I'm not that smart, like the longer they stay in and cook, the higher their chance of success and the less
Sure.
amount of issues they would have, all things being equal, right? So
Right.
obviously you want from 0 to 40 weeks. If you could stay for the whole 40 weeks, everything else being equal, that's the best case scenario. That
Right.
we had no chance of that, right?
Right.
So they said, look, we could pull them both out right now and do our best to save the one that was in distress. Um, but understanding that my other son Edward was, we were then decreasing his chances of being quote unquote normal because we're changing a variable.
Sure.
Or you could we will admit you to the hospital. There are some medications and things we could do to maybe help, but understanding that the longer he stays in, the risk of him not surviving um, is much higher.
Yeah. So very tough call there. Yeah.
If that blood doesn't, and I mean, like, you talk about hard decisions to make.
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
do you sacrifice one so that the other could be normal and healthy, or
Hmm.
do you pull them both out now and risk the quote unquote one that all things considered would be normal and healthy to and to risk saving the other one, which may not
Sure.
even work, right? So
Right.
I'm not like super religious, and I wish I was, but we just kind of made a decision as a family to let's at least try to get to 30 weeks. Like, that was the goal, right? Because
Right.
then, just again, I rely on statistics like you, especially jujitsu, law enforcement. Well, if you make it to 30 weeks, the chance of mortality goes up dramatically, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, so we kept them in, and the doctors were able to get some things regulated, and then at 30 weeks, we did the surgery.
Mm.
Um, so both boys were born. They spent 10 weeks in the hospital, and my one son Edward, because he was out early, like, his executive function, and this was the one that was doing fine.
Right.
So his executive function um, wasn't mature enough yet. So, for instance, like, there's natural reflex of in any animal, to include humans, where you drink milk, you can breathe while you're sucking the milk, you swallow the milk and you breathe, right? And it's just an inherent.
Hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He didn't have that because he was too
Mm.
premature to have that developed instinctively. So he would. When we give him a bottle or when he would take milk, he would just keep sucking and not breathe, and then just boom, fall out.
Yeah.
The monitors would go crazy, and you'd have to stim him back
Mm.
every time.
Scary.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's very scary. And then the other one that was in distress, he had a stroke at birth, so he had scarring on his brain.
Mm.
His eyes hadn't fully developed, so he has cataracts on his eyes, and his vision was not perfect. And I remember that the doctors, who were amazing, but it said that, hey, you guys are going to be in for a very tough road with him.
Yeah.
The prognosis was very bleak. They said, um, possibly wheelchair, best case, braces, speech delays, cognitive delays, all these things. We were kind of staring down the battle of that gun because of the prematurity, the damage to his brain, and then also he has a very rare genetic disease. His variant of that disease is the only known recorded case in the world
Oh,
of this
wow.
disease. So there's no real research or treatment
Mm.
for it, and they don't really know what is affecting him, if anything. So,
Right.
um, we were always dealing with um, throughout his development, was like, we've got these different buckets of things, and we don't know where to put them, right? So, like, if there's a deficiency somewhere, is that because of the prematurity? He'll grow out of it. Is that because of the genetic disorder? Is that because of the brain injury?
Right. And
Is
trying to
that because,
figure out.
or
Right.
or, or is this just him, right? And
Mm.
so, like, um, as he he's getting older, it made it hard. The parenting decisions were hard too, because it's like, well, is this something you can't control? Is this something you can control? Is this a personality trait that we need to adjust, or is
Mm.
this something medical that needs addressed? Right. So a lot of things going on. So anyway, long story short, um, we immediately had speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy. My wife, at a very early age, took ownership of that, and was able to convince one of the physical therapists to open his practice an hour early so that she could bring
Mm.
him, because we were both working, right? and
Yeah.
and, and now it's like, well, it'd be great for my wife not to work, but on the other hand, it's like, we're going to need money for medical treatment
Right.
expenses and everything for this kid, right? So
Right.
having two incomes was essential. So, we were working around schedules. We moved to Texas. I had a great physical therapist down there and a speech therapist who, and it's like I don't know enough about physical therapy. They weren't doing anything I hadn't seen before, so it
Mhm.
wasn't like, wow, there's this new and innovative physical therapy technique that's going to help. But it was, they cared, right?
Yeah. And they were
They
helping.
had
Yeah.
they had a positive attitude, that his outcome was going to be good, and they had a little bit of ability, right? And I always teach it like the precursors for leadership and organizational success and performance are, attitude, a positive attitude, so people want to be around you and work with you, right? On
Right.
the street, same thing, and two, an ability to do your job, right? You don't have to be the best at it, but you should strive for that. But
Mhm.
you need to be competent, right? And they were just, they cared, right? Not
Mhm.
overly emotional so that you bonded with these people, and just, but just they cared about, like, hey man, we want this kid to succeed, right?
Yeah.
Um, so then and I had always done things, and I'll post a video today on Instagram, for people listening. I had always done things to develop them physically. So, just little stuff. Like I would get one of those small plastic trash cans, you put in your bathroom, and I'd put like the little 2 pound weights all over the floor. And I'd be
Mm.
like, okay, and I'd show them a timer, like a silly kid's timer. I'd be like, let's see how quick we can pick them up and put them in. So just trying to work on their neuromuscular
Yeah.
development,
Make a
right?
game out of it, and then they're also getting a workout. Right.
And so, when I got to Minnesota, I was lucky enough to, be welcomed into that wrestling program there, and doing a little coaching with the RTC, and just kind of like a hang around to the program, and
Mhm.
got to be friends with some of the wrestlers and the coaches. And I would bring my kids in there, right? And we bought them singlets so they'd be running around
Mhm.
in the wrestling room. And they weren't wrestling competitively, but I wanted, a couple things. I wanted them to get physically stronger,
Yeah.
and kind of build on that physical therapy, like you said, because we would go to physical therapy once a week.
Mhm.
Well, going to fit and doing those exercises once a week was not enough.
Right. Right.
So, but doing that once a week, and then going down to the wrestling room and rolling around, jumping
Mhm.
over the dummy, dragging the mats, dragging, medicine balls, that really helped. And one of my friends was an assistant coach there, at the university, and he would meet me down there on the weekends and work with my boys.
Oh, that's
Not
awesome. Yeah.
so much wrestling technique, but more setting up obstacles, having them climb on things,
Sure.
climb on him, and crawling around the mat, right? And just developing, that awareness of their bodies in space,
Yeah.
and their
And then they're physically problem solving things too. Yeah.
correct. And
Mhm.
and and so, he far outperformed, especially, AJ, the one that had all the issues,
Mhm.
his prognosis, at least so far. And so if we fast forward it up to today, he's in jujitsu class, he's in my wrestling club, he's, academically, he's in the same class as his brother. They're both doing just fine in
Yeah.
school, and both, pretty good on the mat. So, um, you know, I think, there's several, things that point to their success, but I think that jujitsu and wrestling, and the amount of people that cared about their development, and the time that, to give myself and my wife credit, the time that we put into it, right? Because I'm doing all the stuff with them, right? I'm on the mat,
Sure.
but the last, since August, basically, I've been on the road, for this
Mhm.
campaign, back and forth. But,
Right. Right.
they didn't miss one practice. My
Oh, that's
wife
awesome. Yeah.
works full time, would drive them, drop them off, have the computer in the car. She made sure, because she saw someone that doesn't have a combat sports background.
Mhm.
My wife never trained jujitsu, never, knew anyone that was, a combat sports athlete, but she saw the positive effect that it had on my sons, physically and mentally, right? And
Yeah.
and has bought into it, and realized that, like, this, look, they're not perfect, but
Mhm.
they far exceeded their prognosis, both of them, especially AJ. And
Sure.
and a big part of that, success is because of jujitsu and wrestling. 100%.
Yeah.
It's the discipline you learn from being there. It's the
Mhm.
working through adversity that you learn. It's the structure. It's being part of a team and being part of something,
Right.
and noticing that coaches care about you, and then the confidence that you have as a kid that you can do things physically. I guarantee that kid medically would be in much worse shape if it weren't for jujitsu.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's
There,
not, it
there's
wasn't the only piece, but it was a big piece of the puzzle that helped him, get better. Absolutely.
well, like right now, like I don't take him to physical therapy anymore. We're on the
Right.
mat 5 days a week,
Right.
so there's no need.
Right.
There's no need. He's doing all those things and developing his body, and his movement and his coordination, and his awareness of where he is in space on the jujitsu mat. So
Yeah.
if I noticed that things were slipping, of course I would take him back
Sure.
to a medical professional. I'm not saying that,
Right.
I'm not taking a stance that those things aren't important. They're
Yeah.
extremely important. But
Yeah.
but here's the choice, right? Like I could take him to physical therapy 4 nights a week and pay a copay, and
Hmm.
he's doing things that absolutely will help him. Or I take him to jujitsu and I'm monitoring his development, and
Hmm.
he seems to be moving and progressing forward at the same rate. And he's learning a life skill while doing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just, one of you hear tons of stories about, just the many benefits of jujitsu and jujitsu for, people in their personal lives. And that's just one of them. And yeah, it's a great story to hear how jujitsu can, help out in all kinds of ways. And it's not the end all be all, but it's a big piece of the puzzle that could really, help you out in certain aspects of your life. Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, John, I don't talk in absolutes ever.
Mhm.
I'm too experienced. I've seen too much of the world
Yeah.
to say, but I will tell you this. I am absolutely positive that jujitsu has given that kid a quality of life he would not have had without it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely
Yeah.
100%.
Right.
There's no doubt you could find the most highly trained doctor in the world that would say it didn't have any bearing on it. I would respectfully disagree and show the evidence why it has. So
Sure.
in a world of non-absolutes, I am absolutely
Hmm.
positive that his quality of life would not be what it is right now if it wasn't for jujitsu. And again, I'm not giving myself credit for that. I mean, I've had the wrestling community in Minnesota, now
Hmm.
down in Florida at Ponte Vedra Beach Jiu Jitsu, have just given that opportunity,
Sure.
to me and to him, and both my boys really, and that's why, I'm super grateful and super loyal, to both those places, right? And the guys I've learned from, right? Like my
Yeah.
jujitsu professor who gave me my black belt, Mauricio,
Hmm.
over in Riverview BJJ. Like I would do anything for that guy, man.
Yeah.
I would do anything for that guy. He was so generous and so great to me. And my training partner Lemmy, he's a black belt up in Minnesota. He owns a gym called the Danger Room. Like when COVID hit, we had a great training facility at his house, and he had a really, really, really impressive programming for our development
Yeah.
when I was a brown belt. Those guys just were so generous and
Hmm.
so invested in me,
Yeah.
and seeing me get better, that and then I've been able to pass that along to my sons with the help of the great guys at Ponte Vedra Beach Jiu Jitsu. It's
No,
really
that's
special.
fantastic. And that's a big part of how the jiu-jitsu community is, a lot of it you find they're so open to bringing you in and they want to share this art with you, this great thing that they've had and they want to share it with other people. And you see that a lot in the jiu-jitsu community, how people want to share what a positive influence jiu-jitsu can have. And stories like that are a perfect example. And everybody's kind of got their jujitsu story on how it helped their life, or changed their life, or had a positive impact, and that's just one of them. So, yeah, that's very good to hear. And so, just to wrap it up, because we've been talking for a bit, you've been busy, and but just basically, I'm still trying to get law enforcement officers on the mat, and
Yeah.
we've talked about some personal stuff. We talked about some job stuff, but just just your average advice, to the average law enforcement watching this, could be 35-year-old male or female, just your average person, no matter their age. What advice would you give to that officer saying, I've been on for 5 years, I've been looking to do something, and is jujitsu right for me? What would you kind of tell that person?
Yeah. So great question. And here's what I would say. So like, let's address the excuses for why people don't do it first,
Hmm.
right? So the first thing you hear is like, I don't have time, right? I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. And then I think if you sat down and wrote out, like you always hear this, like, I eat pretty healthy, like dietitians, guys will tell a dietitian or girls, I eat pretty healthy. I go, okay, well, write out what you eat for a
Hmm.
week. And you look at it and it's like, man, I
Yeah,
don't eat very good,
right.
and,
Yeah.
and like write down everything, every little thing, and
Hmm.
so same thing is like, okay, you say you don't have time. Do me a favor, keep a journal of what you do every day for a week, and let's look and see where there could be gaps in your schedule where you could
Yeah,
train. And I'm not saying it's not the case, but I've never found anyone that I've asked to do that not have time to train
right.
when they do it. Okay, so and not having time, you may have to make some time and
Hmm.
sacrifice something else that you do, and not family commitments, right? Like you may have to
Right.
sacrifice like video games or
Yeah. Two
tinkering on your
hours of TV or the
TV,
phone. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Right.
whatever it
Yeah.
is, right? So,
Yeah.
so that's what I would say is like if your reason is, hey, I'm not going to have time to do it, I want you to journal for 1 week, and or use your calendar on your phone, whatever mechanism works for you, and put your time for work, like how long it takes you to get ready in the morning, like write it, be specific, be detail oriented, like you're writing a police report, right?
Mm.
And time and a timeline, and don't skip anything. And then let's take a look at your schedule and see where we could fit it in, right? The second thing you get is the job should provide me the training. Well, we addressed that earlier in the podcast. Like,
True.
look, let's control what we can. You're not getting
Hmm.
provided to it for the job. Agreed. The
Right.
job should, but no other job in the world is going to allow you to sit there and just not perform and say that it's your fault, right? You've got to
Hmm.
just take some initiative and do it. The third thing is money. Oh, it's too expensive. So the question I always pose to folks to say that is, I got to say, hey, you shouldn't ask what it costs. You got to ask what it's worth, right?
Very good. Yeah.
And and
Yeah.
when you buy and when you join a gym, especially if it's the right gym, right, is like you're buying a membership into a community. That's why they call it a membership. So it's not like a fee for service where like I give
Mm.
you X amount of dollars, you provide me this service. I give you $50, you change my oil. I give you $150, you fix my sink, right? Like, so
Mm.
this is not that. This is I'm a member of a community. There is a financial investment involved in being a member of that community to maintain the standard of that community, and I'm willing to do it. So think about it like a country club. Like you join a country club to golf, like whether you play that week or not, like you're still paying that membership,
Right.
but you get to go to the clubhouse, you hang out with your buddies, you meet friends there, your kids have made, right? So you're making an investment. And again, I would use the journaling technique is like, what do you spend money on? And like us cops, like we love guns and gadgets, right? So
Yeah.
like, you've got some gun that you spent, $8,000 on that sits in a safe and never gets shot, right? Maybe you shot it
Right.
once to sight it in, or
Yeah.
maybe you haven't even done that yet, right? And
Mm.
and, and again, I'm not telling officers or law enforcement officers what you should or shouldn't spend your money on. I'm not saying that. I'm just addressing the excuses I normally hear.
Right.
And so like you know I love gadgets, I love guns, I want all that stuff, but it's more important for me to train, for my kids to train, right?
Right.
So I chose to spend my money um on those things. So you've just got to make a decision. And like, again, statistically, I would always ask this question in the first day of control tactics training, when I was teaching in the academy, is that, how many former law enforcement in the class? Back then, 2/3 of the class would raise their hands, right? Okay.
Mm.
How, of all you law enforcement officers, how many of you have ever had, to take someone's life or shoot someone with your firearm? And every so many classes, you get one hand,
One.
right?
Yeah. Right.
Now, how many people that were prior, state or local law enforcement have had to put their hands on a subject? Boom, the whole class hands
Yeah.
go up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think firearms training is very important. That is, I am not saying it's not important. I am not saying you shouldn't do it. But what I am saying is we spend lots of time doing that, and it's disproportionate to the amount of time we put hands on people.
Right.
This is inversely proportioned to what we do on our job.
Absolutely.
We
Yeah.
we very rarely, thank God, have to use deadly force. We routinely have to put hands on someone.
Yeah.
So I will make a bold statement. I think if you carry a badge and gun to work and you do not train jujitsu, you are crazy.
Yeah.
You, I think you're begging for an incident to go poorly for you, and
Hmm.
I think that you are unprepared to deal with a lot of situations that you will routinely encounter on the job.
Yeah.
Um, and I think if you're any type of instructor, whether it's defensive tactics instructor or a CQ, a SWAT, whatever, if you don't train jujitsu, you are trying to think of a right word to say.
Hmm.
You are presenting a product that is very incomplete.
Yes. That's a very nice way to put it. Yes.
You are
And
presenting
it's
a
true.
product
It's
that's
true.
very incomplete because, again, the the odds are not in your favor if you're not trained, and
Right.
if you're not training yourself, and it's not that expensive.
No.
If you think about it, like if I'm buying a gun that's 7 or 8 grand with all these fancy lasers and you can't carry it for work. Like I don't know about Chicago, but
No.
I'm not allowed.
It's gonna
I'm
sit
not
in the
allowed to.
closet.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
allowed to carry my personal weapons on
Right.
duty.
Right.
I'm allowed to carry my issued firearm to work,
Yeah.
and the long guns that are issued by my agency. I'm not allowed to go get like some souped up gun with all
Sure.
kinds of optics and lasers and stuff on it, and be like, well, I don't want the issued weapon. I'm going to carry this. That's
Yeah.
not authorized. So,
Right.
like the bulk of the time I'm carrying a weapon is when I'm working,
Right.
and that's the gun that's issued to me. So, I could go buy like some race car, Ferrari pistol that's super fun to shoot at the range, but that's not the gun I carry to work.
No, it's gonna sit in the closet. Exactly. And
But
90% of gyms probably, most gyms in Chicago, 90% of them give a huge law enforcement discount on their
yep.
membership, discount on the keys. And, so it's, yeah, there's
And
definite, it's,
and eventually, if you train long enough, you're going to get a black belt, and then most gyms don't charge black belts. So
that's true.
it's you're going to get to a point where you won't have to pay, and quite
Yeah.
frankly, where you can maybe make a little bit of money on the side doing privates or teaching classes. So I
Yeah.
mean, it's definitely an investment. It's a long-term investment, but it's an investment.
Mhm.
But I mean, we have a guy at our gym who just got his blue belt. I mean, I think he's 64 years old. So he just
Wow.
started. He
That's
started
awesome.
jujitsu in his
Yeah.
60s, and so like, and he's not in law enforcement. I think he's a stockbroker or some kind of wealth
Sure.
management person. So nothing to do with what we do, but he sees the benefits of it, and he has his two
Yeah.
kids in it, and it's just one of those things that I think once you try very few people try it and then are like, man, this is not gonna. I've never. Let me put it to you this way again, and not talking in absolutes, but I've never met someone in law enforcement that started jujitsu and felt like this isn't going to help me professionally. I haven't
Yeah.
met one.
I've never had that either. For the people that come in, they get it right away and they're like, "Oh man, this is totally going to help me out." Most of the time, the people that quit are the people, that usually can't take, kind of that ego hit.
Yeah,
They come in and kind of get schooled and smoked a little bit and it hurts their pride and hurts their ego. And usually that's the reason they don't come back and they say, "Well, it's just not for me. I don't like it." And I get that. It's hard to kind of check the ego at the door when
yeah, it sucks, man.
when you're a
It
20
sucks.
25-year-old state trooper and you got your shit together and some old guy like me smothers you in mount for 5 minutes, it's not
Yeah,
great.
terrible.
So yeah.
I got a great story for you about that, man. And so when I was out at our academy, we have a special operations section, and these are the guys that train our special teams. The operators and A-type meat eaters in awesome shape. I remember
Mhm.
talking with one of the instructors when I was leaving the academy, kind of like my going away lunch, and he was like, man, I wish I would have, you know, come down there and trained with you guys, because
Mm.
we would train in the mat room all the time. And I'm like, why didn't you, man? He goes, my ego, man. I didn't want to go in there and get my ass kicked. And
Yeah.
I'm like, you got to think about this. So what if you started the day I did down there? I mean, you'd have three
Hmm.
and a half years of experience at it right now. And then you'd be the guy kicking new people's asses. And,
That's
it's,
true.
it's like a pyramid scheme. Right.
Right.
And so like, and I thought it was really cool that he could at least make that observation,
Yeah.
right, and realize the mistake he made.
Yeah.
But dude, it sucks. Like I always dread
Yeah.
going into a gym as like a guest because guys are going to be coming for you, especially with
Right.
the black belt. Like you just got to kind of humble yourself. I talked about
Yeah.
this with a colleague the other day too. When I was out on the road, and it's like, you want to take my arm, take it, man. You want to put
Right.
a guillotine on me, I tap immediately. My neck's
Hmm.
messed up, and if that guy goes and brags about tapping out a black belt that night, well, that's fine, man. I
Right.
don't I don't get too wound up about that stuff anymore. I'm too
Yeah.
old,
Me
and
neither. Yeah.
I'm more in a coaching role now anyway.
Right.
So I'm not a hardcore
in
competitor
in a good
anymore.
jiu-jitsu gym is not going to fault you for not knowing what to do and not being good. That's how you start. That's how we all started. And I started in the white belt line just like
Yeah.
everybody else. So I try and make those people feel comfortable when they're there and say, you're not going to know what to do and you're going to be out of your element and this is going to be strange and kind of weird for you, but that's just the way it is. We all went through that and you kind of try and get them comfortable at least doing that at least so it's not, yeah, we're just going to beat you up and then show you how tough we are and then give you the boot.
Well, most schools have fundamentals classes, which are for beginners. At least I know we do. And
Yeah,
and most schools, when you look at the schedule, they have it. So like,
I
it's
teach
not.
fundamentals twice a week. That's what I
Yeah.
do. So
There you
I do
go.
the trial
Perfect.
classes, white belts. I have new people coming in all the time, and that's fantastic to me. I love teaching fundamentals, and then I'll watch somebody progress and get their blue belt, and I think that's fantastic. And I'm like, I remember when you couldn't even shrimp down the mat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, there you go. There you go. Right. So it's not like, I mean, there are some schools, don't, and we've all
there
walked in
there
them,
are.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Where you walk in there and there's a bunch of tattooed up,
yeah,
roided up guys, and it's just that isn't that's an intimidating environment, even
yeah,
for someone like me who's been training a long time, right? And
yeah.
and like so maybe that environment people want, right? Maybe there's some guys that want to jump in the
Sure.
fire. Maybe some guys and gals don't, right? And
Right.
so like that there you got to find a gym that's the right fit. Like
Hmm.
I've always said that for people in our line of work, proximity is my number one choice.
Yes.
Like I never heard of a force association before. I got my
Mhm.
black belt through Checkmat, right?
Right.
But there was no Checkmat gym in Jacksonville when I moved here. I wasn't in a position to open one. My job is just too involved for me to have a second
Sure.
business. So my first thing was I'm like, I'm going to start to the gym closest to my house, and
Yeah.
I'll work my way out if that's not a good fit. And luckily for me, it was perfect, and
Hmm.
it's been great. But that would be my suggestion. Like if
Yeah.
guys need to find a gym, hit me up on Instagram, or
Yeah.
please, look for John at Man of the Law, and
Absolutely.
I'll find you a gym close
Yeah.
to your house that I think would be good for you. And
Yeah.
and if you're in the Jacksonville, North Florida area on the west east side, especially, like come to my gym, and I'm in there all the time, and train with us. And I don't have any financial interest in Ponte Vedra Beach Jiu Jitsu. I'm in there. I coach in there. My kids are in
Mhm.
there, but I don't take a penny from that place. I don't have any ownership interest in it. It's just a
Yeah.
great place to train. So,
And
um,
I could say the same thing.
yeah,
I don't get paid for bringing in students. I don't get, paid
yep,
commission. I don't get paid from Brazil 0 to 1 at all. I've
yep,
had a free membership there since I was a brown belt because I've been teaching.
exactly. Me too. Me too.
But that's
Yep,
it. And I was
yeah,
already at a very discounted rate. They were charging me like 100 a month. And then once I
yeah,
started teaching 2, 3 classes a week, they just waived that. But I make $0 bringing law enforcement officers in. And I do the same thing because I catch officers off guard. Sometimes they're like, well, I live way on the south side. And I'm like, okay, I know 2 great gyms you could train at that are near your house. And they're like, oh, really? So yeah,
yeah,
I have no problem. You don't have to train at my gym or you don't have to train at A Force, but it'd be good if you did.
yeah.
But we will help you find a good, safe environment for law enforcement training if you reach out to either one of us. Absolutely.
Yeah, man, it's that so that would be my answer to that question. It's just, like start with a radius, within 5 miles of your
Sure.
house,
It's got to
go
be
out to
convenient.
7, right? And then
Yeah.
and then try the closest one. And then if
Mm,
it's not for you, then move to the next closest one. And because you don't want to pick a place that's like, well, I really want to train with Joe, but you live like on the northwest side of Jacksonville and it's an
right.
hour drive. Like now that will eat into your time, right? Now that
Yeah.
that is going to become an issue. But I would look either close to work or
Yeah.
close to home, right? And then just pick a place and start. Like, look, man, like I know you're really good, John. Like I think I'm really good at jiu-jitsu, but look, man, there's a lot of
There's a
really good
lot.
people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good ones, man. And
Like you didn't know A Force when you walked in there and you're like, wow, these guys are incredible. So yeah,
yeah,
there's, yeah.
great at jujitsu and great group of guys,
Yeah.
and great ownership and leadership from the top of that place, and it sets the tone for just how things go. And it's not a serious fight gym or a hardcore
Yeah.
competition gym. It's a family gym, right?
Right.
But you could still learn really solid, effective jujitsu that I guarantee, will help you do your job as a law enforcement officer. Guaranteed. I will guarantee it 100%, not 99.9,
Mhm.
100%. If you start training, you'll see results within months, not maybe of your skill as it would translate into a life or death situation, but you will see results in your confidence. You'll see results in your attitude, in your interactions with people. And then as the skills start to come, your passion for it will grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well said. And we'll kind of end on that note because that's kind of a perfect note to end on and well said. And so it was good talking to you again, Mr. Scargill, United States Secret Service Special Agent Joe Scargill. And it was a pleasure to talk to you again. We got to, if you watched the first podcast, you can tune in for the second podcast. We had a couple of technical issues, but we got to, kind of review and go over, some more stuff that we, didn't touch on earlier, and another great conversation with you. I always love talking, jujitsu and law enforcement, and so yeah, thanks again. Thanks for being on the show.
It was a pleasure, John. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, I'm glad we got a chance to run this back. And, hopefully I'd love to be a regular guest on your show. I really believe in what you're doing. And, you
Much
know,
appreciated. Yeah,
dude, it's to end. It is for folks listening, and all of us in law enforcement, like the ball busting you take for putting yourself out there with anything in our
yes,
careers. And a lot of it's in good fun, right?
it is. Yeah,
But it still takes a lot of courage to
yes,
put yourself out there
yeah,
and to say things even if you're very passionate about it,
hmm,
like you're going to get it right.
yeah,
You're going to get it in good fun from your friends,
yeah,
but you're going to get it nasty from guys that are jealous of the fact that you've
yeah.
accomplished
And
something.
and
And
I've
yep,
gotten the nasty starting as I've started to get bigger. Once people started seeing, I'm on
yeah,
Jiu Jitsu dummies and there are other stuff. So I've
yep,
gotten the back talk too, but most is
yeah,
positive. Yeah.
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 And what I'll say about those guys is and gals, that it is shame on you, and
Right.
that is your insecurity, your jealousy, and to
Mhm.
think, and I guarantee that bleeds over into the street with your job, and it's why you're going
Mhm.
to have issues, and
Right.
why, quite frankly, a few bad apples give us all a bad name in our profession, and we should be celebrating officers, agents that,
Yes.
that put themselves out there and promote a positive message, and are promoting the art of jujitsu, but also just being a better cop, being a
Yeah.
better agent, being a better deputy, being a better trooper, being a better person. And John, I celebrate that, and I'm so humbled that you would have me on your show, and I'm super proud of you, man, and what you do. Keep it up.
Thank you. No, and I'm it's a pleasure talking to you and somebody that's got, the depth of experience with the Secret Service and all you do, to protect our important people and dignitaries and all the rest. It's great talking to you. So I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your life experience and your jiu-jitsu experience. So thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Let's run it back after the inauguration, man.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Scargill.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Okay. Appreciate it.
Yep. Bye bye.